I can hear you through my headphones, and now everybody can hear me too. We're here. To be expected. The golden boy's not here. Yeah, so we're just gonna have a conversation with ourselves.
We got the zero
here
in there.
I'm testing upload here. I just answered, but my chat answer. Oh, it's my. So the question is, it says resume current broadcast. Has it actually resumed? Can you hear me, Ben?
I can hear you.
All right, kids. Are we up or is it slow? Because I seem to have a better internet connection now, but I am not 100% sure if things are working properly. And we'll get Ben back in here and we'll see. Are we back, Phil? Ben's joining. See and hear. Ben. Boom. I don't know how this is working. It seems like we're back. I don't know.
Yeah. Looks better.
Well, so one of the things that's kind of strange is ever since we had the ice storm and we were down for a week, it's hard for me to force that band that I'm using, which gives me sort of like a 10 to 13 upload speed. And it doesn't seem to be forcing it. So it's a bit of a hit or miss when I go into those settings. So I think that's part of the problem that we're having right now. I don't know why. And I don't even know if I can call AT&T about it because they may say, wait a minute, you hacked our box and you're forcing a band. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with all that. But it seems like we're here. Desmond, thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, let's go. Come on, let's go. What are you having to drink? What are you having to drink?
All right, so I'm on red wine again. This is one from this big box of stuff that my dad sent me. This is, where is this from? This is Italian, Il Brutto.
Okay, but what is what is it you normally drink? Rioja? What's that? What's Rioja?
Yeah, it's like a really dry Spanish wine. It's lovely.
Like dry, like Chianti, or very different from that?
Yeah, no, quite similar to Chianti. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You don't have that there? Is that not something?
Yeah, I'm sure we do, but it's not something that people drink very often. Yes.
All right.
Okay.
What are you on?
My buddy's winery nearby, which is called Roots Winery, and he's doing some canned wines. And this is artwork inspired by the artist that did a lot of the covers for Yes albums. So we had a local artist do this, and it is it's a red blend. It's 65% Syrah and 35% Zinfandel, and it's quite delightful, I have to say. So that's what I'm having, and I'm going to put that into and he makes exceptional. I mean, this guy is a no joke winemaker, but he's just been having some fun making some canned wines, which are really. I'm
really struggling with that whole thing with red wine coming out of a can, but
I know, but it's delicious. So cheers.
No,
cheers, everybody. Right. Thanks for hanging around. And I don't know if this breaks up the live stream into 3 different parts and stuff, but there we go. Pat, glad to have you. 360 grad, behave yourself. Chris, good to have you here. Desmond, Colin, Jago, Sam, Gerald, Leo, Phil, Pat, Rabbit Tribble. We know where you're from. Be careful over there in gambling land. Bill, we got some stuff going on. Yeah, very nice. Okay, good. Here we go. Caleb.
All right.
Caleb is on a much needed break, and he will be back next week. So there you go. So today is March 3rd. Is it still March 3rd where you are, or have we already?
No, it's March 4th where I am. Yeah, we're already past midnight here now.
All right. Hey, Roz. Good to see you. Wonder how things are going in the dark timeline. Oh, I don't know what that means, Sam. Do you know what the dark
No, I have no
timeline
idea.
is? Please
I have
explain when
no
you're
idea.
ready. I mean, we're all here waiting, bated breath to know what the dark timeline is. I've heard of the dark web. I don't know what the dark timeline is. That sounds like a kind
No.
of like a horrible nightmare for editors. I entered the dark timeline. I saw a spinning ball and I realized I had a dark timeline. I don't know what that is. So interesting.
No, me neither. Something new. Hey, I got something I want to show you this week. I got a Kickstarter thing that I backed ages ago, which has finally turned up. This thing's great. I haven't actually used it on a gig yet. There we go. H&Y.
Yeah.
This is they did 2 versions of this. This is genius. I will report back over in the fullness of time as it works real world. So this is an adaptering for, so this is an ND filter, which is an 82mm thread. So you get a step down ring. So I have those. 82 is the biggest that I have that I generally use, which is on that lens over there. I have quite a lot of 77s. I have a 67, a 72. So normally you have step down rings for all of that stuff, which gets messy. This, as you twist it, I'll try and get the AF.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So
is that the thread? It's a chain. No, but is that a
so
changing thread?
Oh, come on, focus. Has it got it? Oh,
there we go.
No. There we go. Yeah. So the thread
brilliant.
changes size. So you can then, so what you do, you put it into its smallest one, offer it up to the lens, let go, and then it bites, and then you just twist it in to tighten it.
What?
So it's a still proper screw-in thread. So it's absolutely solid.
What?
So that's on a 77. And then when you unscrew it again, it just comes back up. So now, and then it goes, so this does everything from a 67 to an 82 mil. I think this is genius. They actually make this with a built-in ND as well, so you can buy the whole thing as one unit. Yeah. But I just bought the one that had the adapter in because
is that a variable ND or is that a fixed ND?
Yeah, that's a variable. So that's the thing that I tend to be on and off lenses more than anything else. So so far so good. I say it feels very solid. It doesn't fall off any lens that I've tried it on, which is everything from 67 to 82. And it feels solid, really well made. I was expecting it to be a little flimsy.
How much?
It's called the Revo ring. Revo. I can't remember what I paid for it. I want to say about
100 euro? Huh?
No, way less than that. Like 40, 50, something like that.
Do you think the glass is decent? Have you put it as the image? Is the image get a little funky?
That didn't include the Very ND, so that you can buy it as one unit with a Very ND included. That's my own Very ND.
Oh, you can use your own. It doesn't have to be from them.
Expensive. No, so that's just, you can put any 82mm filter on the front of it, and then that is an adapter which will take it from anything from 67 back up to the
82
native size of 82. Yeah. So it's pretty.
Put a link. Chris says that he's actually says that he's always read H and Y as handy. Like it's H and Y, handy is the way that people call the product. Is that right? Maybe.
I don't know.
Handy.
That's news to me, but that would make sense.
Handy. Well, it is. It sounds like it's handy.
Yeah. The cover's neoprene 360. Yeah. I wasn't expecting it to come in a cover, but that's pretty handy because obviously the little pouch that I have for that filter, you want to store that filter on the adapter ideally. So that was quite a nice little bonus to get that. So yeah, it's taken months for it to arrive, but it's good. I'm happy.
Shazam, you're not really late. You actually came in at the perfect time with the crap that happened in the first 10 to 15 minutes of the show. So welcome. Caleb's out this week. We'll be back next week. And we got a fair amount of people hanging out. I appreciate everybody sticking around. And we're into March. Another month. in another year. Can you believe that we're already in the 3rd month of 2021? How did that happen? It's just amazing.
Yes, it is amazing. It's going quickly, which is bizarre, seeing as I'm kind of imprisoned at home. It feels like time should really be going slowly, but thankfully it's
going
motoring
fast.
on.
Yeah. So Leo's asking, so it uses an 82 millimeter ND. I'm assuming you could actually put any 82 millimeter filter in there. You could probably put like a grad or something in there. Yeah.
Anything with an 82mm thread on. I mean, technically, you could even put it onto a filter holder system and then put ND grads and stuff into the front of it. You could do anything with it. But I would say for the most part,
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was always just sold as the Revo ring. I don't think it didn't have that Handy Filters branding on until I saw it. So it came from Hong Kong, I think.
Yeah, so if you go to handyfilters.com,
I think it's just one of those things that will speed up. Okay, it's there, is it?
You go to handyfilters.com, it's HNY Redefining Photography, and then it's the Revo ring, and that's one of their products.
That's
and it's how
much is it?
It's 34 pounds. Including VAT.
Okay.
So yeah, pretty reasonable, I have to say.
And I say it feels a lot more
that's not the one you got.
Thought.
Yeah, so the one that
it's
you
not?
got
Is that the smaller one?
Yeah, there's all different kinds, and they even have an 82 to 95. But the one that you got is about 38 pound.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty good value.
I'm going to bookmark that. That looks pretty great. Very cool. Super all right, I like that. Wait, Shazam got the Pocket 6K Pro. Good for you. Very nice.
Excellent. Yeah. Well done. Yeah, very interested in having a play with that camera at some point. It's great. Any problems with vignetting at 16mm? Oh, good question. And do you know what? I haven't actually tried yet. But I don't think...
Can you spot a 16mm?
No, it shouldn't do.
Can you have one, though? Do you have one around?
Yeah, that's what's on it. I haven't got a body to put it on because the only full-frame body is what I'm filming us with right now.
Okay.
But I don't see that it would because... So that's a 1635. And let me just do the little twisting to get that onto it. It's actually... I would say something like 2 or 3 millimeters. Come on, focus. 2 or 3 millimeters.
Bring it close. There
I would say.
Okay. Yeah. No, it was. It's fine. Yeah.
It's just add. It's good. Yeah, it was in. Now it's on. But it's only moved the filter. I don't know how far off is it from where it would normally be sitting. Yeah, I would say 3 or 4 mil. 3 or 4 mil. So I don't know. I'll need to try it and see if it vignettes. But I haven't actually tried it with that lens. I've tried it to put it on, but not actually on a camera body. So excellent question. I will come back to you.
Okay.
Philip Bloom did do a video about the Revo ring, which was, I think, how I heard about it. I think when it first came out on Kickstarter, he did something on it. Yeah. But nice. A long time coming, as everything with Kickstarter, but I think it seems like it's going to be pretty useful. Yeah. So that was my new toy for this week. And just before we came on and had all the techie issues, me and you were chatting about your new toy this week. So let's get back to that conversation.
Yeah, I finally scratched the itch, and I got the camera that I've wanted to get for a long time. And people will maybe be surprised at what it is, because it's not a camera that I bought for video. It's the X100V from Fujifilm. So it's a rangefinder style, optical viewfinder, electronic viewfinder. They now have it's really flush to the body, but there is a screen that does flip, which is a big change for the 100 series. And they've redesigned this 35 millimeter equivalent lens. It's a 23 millimeter lens on an APS-C. So this camera is not a brand new camera. This has been out for a year, but it's my new present for myself. So I'm happy with it. The body is weather sealed now. And then I have this Nisi adapter here, which you take the little ring off for the top. There's also Fuji versions, but you take this and you put it on here. And this is, basically it's a UV filter that is designed to screw on here, because the only thing that's not weather sealed on this camera is the lens itself. So once this is on there, then this entire camera is weather sealed, which is pretty exciting. It's a leaf shutter, which means that you can set that shutter to sync with a flash. There's a small built-in flash. Of course, you could use other flashes with this as well, up to 1/4000th of a second. So very high shutter speeds.
I so miss leaf shutter.
Yeah,
leaf shutters.
So you know, the disadvantage to this system is that
cool.
it's not interchangeable lens, but I'm finding that I'm using my X-T3 and X-T4 so much for video. And the reason why the X100V over the XE4 with the new 27mm lens, Bryce, is, in actual fact, the 27mm focal length on a crop sensor camera is probably my favorite. And the reason it's my favorite is because probably my favorite field of view is 40mm. So if I was going to put a full frame, you know, piece of glass on a full frame camera, my favorite focal length is 40mm. So that's essentially a 27mm lens on a crop sensor. But the XE4 is not weather sealed. I already have an X-T3 and an XT. Actually, the first camera that I ever bought from Fuji, which is right here, is an XE2. And I love, I just happened to have it out here because I had lent it to my son for something. And I love this camera. I love rangefinder style cameras, just in terms of a shooting experience. But it was pretty slow. It was their older sensor. I borrowed the XE3 for a while, which I actually really liked. But I just wanted a camera that I could just throw in the bag anytime. And I also really love being forced to shoot at a fixed focal length.
Me too.
So, yeah.
Me too.
So, yeah. So
I'm interested because I've been looking, funnily, at cameras myself this week for similar purpose. Just fixed focal length, but for me as compact as possible, because I've spent quite a lot of the last week getting motorbikes fettled and back on the road for spring and all this kind of stuff. So hopefully this year we get to do some long trips, which we always, well, normally in normal years we go and do, you know, big multi-day trips around Central Europe and Southern Europe. That's always great. I'm looking for something to take with me on those trips, something a little better than the phone, but I don't want to be taking all the proper gear. So I've been looking at the Ricoh GR series.
The GR3. Well, the GR, so the GR3 is sort of this and the X100 series are sort of the two street photography cameras of choice for most people.
Right.
And it looks brilliant.
And the GRs, I used to work in camera. I used to work in camera shops when I was, I don't know, like 1999-ish. And the original film GR, I would dearly, dearly love one. But they're crazy money now. They're really expensive. Yeah. You can get, there's still quite a lot of them used on eBay in Japan. But you're looking at like £700 for one of those. Which, to be honest, I still think it's worth it, but it's just I don't have that money to chuck into what's essentially a toy right now, and particularly for a film one, which would really be a toy. So I'm looking at. I had the very first digital GR because when in the camera shop we were always obsessed with the film GRs. The first Digi one came out, and that was a great little camera. It had its serious limitations, but form factor's lovely. The lens is fantastic on it. Color was really good. So I'm interested in buying something like that again. And I'm kind of tempted also at a film camera for travel with, because again, that whole thing about slowing yourself down and just making you think a little bit more when you're using a fixed focal length. And again, I'm like you, I prefer 35 to a 40, but we're a very similar kind of focal length. It's great for just making you move around, making you think, making you slow down and compose. And shooting film, also does that, because you can't just go, I'll try one, you've got whatever, you've got your 36 frames, and I'm going to slow down and really think this through and actually look at my exposure properly, because that's the other great thing. It's very good for you, for your general composition and thinking things through. So I'm sorely tempted. So I'm looking at alternatives, and I've been looking at all over the internet at kind of alternatives to the GR, but more like 200 quid rather than 6-7. There's quite a lot of interesting little bits of kit out there from various manufacturers that were making.
There's actually, I just saw a comparison between the GR3 and I don't remember the model number, but there's a tiny little Fujifilm camera, which is the same size sensor. It's a 28 millimeter equivalent, which is what the GR3 is. It's not a 35 millimeter. And they're very, very similar cameras, but the Fuji camera is about half the price of the GR3. One of the things that I didn't like about the GR3, even though it looked great and was even smaller, is it doesn't have the optical viewfinder EVF combination. It does have an attachment that you can stick onto the top of the camera, but I don't like little pieces that you have to add onto something.
Agreed.
Personally. So I think that was the thing that definitely turned me off of that particular camera.
And I know we were talking about this, was it last episode or the one before, and we were talking about this, it was with the new Sony, and we were talking about with the FX3, and we were saying about the lack of viewfinder of EVF. And I said, I don't like framing still photography. I really don't like framing like this with a camera in front of me.
I mean, the only time that I like it, the only time I like it is if I'm doing something, out there, and I just want to flip this up and I want to look down and I want to have it. So that's the only time that I like that. But 99% of the time when I take still photographs, I want to take a camera and put it up to my eye, and I just don't feel the same way about video. But I do feel that way about that. The camera that I was talking about, which people are putting into the chat, is the X70. That's the Fujifilm, and it's about, I think you can get it for about $500 US now. It's not in that $200 to $300 price range. It might be a little bit more than that. It's definitely cheaper than the Ricoh. But again, I think that the problem with it for me is that it's not. I don't think it has it doesn't have an EVF, so you're strictly going with that. Wingspan says, "Love my GR2." Yeah, I mean it's great if you are of the style where you can shoot with the screen for still photography. Then I think it's definitely that.
But I'd say I'm seriously tempted at looking at film for this, not just because. We all love film. We all like using it as a bit of a novelty thing. But I'm seriously looking at it for these kind of motorcycle trips that we do, because there's no batteries need sorting.
Right.
Realistically, if I limit myself, if we go away for 4 days, I'm going to take 2 rolls of film with me. That's it. One of which will be in the camera before I set off.
Yeah.
It's very little to think about with it. And one, it means that I'm not going to end up ruining everyone's time by stopping and going, no, lads, we're going to have to wait here for half an hour because the sun's going to come round and then So I'm not needing to do that or tempted to do that.
Yeah.
But also it means that you've just very limited stuff that you don't need to take anything else with you. You don't need to take loads of memory cards or things to back it up, which if you travel with the family, you're in the car, that's different. So I'm seriously thinking about it from an actual practical point of view. And I'm reading a brilliant book about a motorcycle journey that happened in 1981. This guy set off from Belfast to head to Sydney in Australia. So from Northern Ireland to Australia, and didn't really make it and got into all kinds of scrapes. But it's sort of making me quite nostalgic, not taking a phone, just having maps, getting lost. And all good adventures start with getting a little bit lost on those kind of journeys. I've always found, and having everything on your phone and not being able to get lost with Google Maps is a little bit
I know.
It spoils the fun a little bit. So I'm kind of thinking about for bikey trips that I might just try and go analog, including the maps thing. Get lost a little bit. Yeah. So there we go.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the selling point for me was yes, it was a rangefinder style camera, but the fact that it is weather sealed was a
Hmm.
pretty big advantage. And I really did want just something that I could just take anywhere with me and not have to make the decision of, oh, I'll bring the 16 and I'll bring the Laowa 9
Yeah.
millimeter, and I'll also have the 23, which is really, it's the 23 and the 35, which are on there probably the most. I really do like shooting wide angle as well, but I can always bring another camera when I want to do that if I need to. So, it scratched the itch, but it did it at a fraction of the cost of what it would have, to get a C70 or something. And I'm pretty,
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. We're shooting a lot of content right now with the XT4. We are using the big, the MKX lenses, the 18 to 55, the 50 to 135 on
Mm-hmm.
it. But we
Beautiful
are
lenses. Yeah.
we're doing interframe noise reduction, and we're doing normal noise reduction, and that 4K interframe noise reduction, along with a +2 noise reduction on that camera at 100 megabits per second. We are shooting everything on green screen, and it is remarkable how clean the image is when we're pulling keys. It is. We did tests
Really?
at 200. We did tests at 400. We took external recordings on the Ninja 5. There was not enough of a difference for us to justify doing any of those things once we turned that noise reduction on. And generally we're shooting at a shutter speed of a 1/96th, because there's a lot of motion with puppets and things like that. So we're not shooting
Mm-hmm.
we're shooting at 23.98, but our shutter speed is at a 1/96th. And we're shooting most of our stuff usually at about an f8 or T9 on the 18 to 55 and the 50 to 135, and we're
Mm-hmm.
shooting at 1600 ISO, but we're sometimes pushing all the way up to 3200 ISO. And with the interframe noise reduction, I am blown away how clean that image is on the Fuji camera.
Interesting.
It's actually night and day compared to the C200 when you're shooting to SD cards. It's unbelievable, and you're talking about it. It's just crazy how much sharper it is and how much cleaner it is. It's crazy.
Honestly, it's a funny thing with that C200, and we were talking about this, and I think I've mentioned this before, and we were looking at the C70, and I know me and you were both looking at it, talking about that, the advantages that it has over the C200.
Just one
And
second.
I've
I
just
just want to say
shot.
goodnight to
Go on.
Shiz. Shiz, thanks for coming.
Oh, nice, Shiz.
We missed you.
Yeah, good to see you
Thanks for
again.
coming. Go ahead. Sorry,
Yeah.
Ben.
But having shot now a couple of recent projects in RAW on that camera, and it's an
It's night.
entirely
That's
different
night and day.
beast.
Oh, that's a different camera.
It's just so now this is it. I'm not buying another camera. I'm just going to shoot everything in RAW with this and sort out. Just put the money that I would have spent on a new camera into either cards or a solid pod. I haven't decided yet which way to go with that. Solid pod means you can get loads and loads of stuff on that, but then I think that whole thing that we were just talking about not shoot for a lot of jobs, making you think a little bit and plan things out, because you can't be shooting hour after hour after hour of RAW
Yep.
on that thing. It's not going to have
Yep.
storage anyway.
Yep.
Interesting. So the other interesting thing from this week was the did you see the DJI, the new FPV drone that launched yesterday?
Yes.
That looks a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Jago's just ordered one. He's coming tomorrow, so I think they'll be it just seems like a massive crash fest. But when those things are flown well, and now having a decent imaging system onto it, I think that's very, very interesting.
I think so.
Not for every job, obviously, but just manic, crazy, cool shit.
Yeah,
It's good. I'm very excited.
It
to
is
see
fun.
stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. Slavic has a 100S. I mean, I think the 100S still has value, Slavic. Get it out there and upgrade or not, but I think Fuji has done great image since day one, especially for JPEG. Obviously even better for RAW, but with JPEG you get the film simulations. But if you've got the right software, for instance, if you are looking at a Fuji camera for stills, what you can do is you can get Capture One. They make a standalone Fuji version, or you can just get the whole thing, which includes support for every camera, and the film simulations are in there. So what you can do is you can shoot raw, and then you can just apply the film simulations in post.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And interesting on the whole Capture One thing that I've been using Lightroom for ages. I'm generally a little miffed with Adobe at the moment, across the board, with all sorts of reasons for pricing and instability of product, for the ridiculous amount of money I pay them every month. So I've been looking at because I do use Lightroom, I do use Photoshop, but I am seriously looking at Capture One. It is quite dear, but it's a one-off purchase. It's not the subscription model.
Well,
they do that as well.
It is and it isn't, because they tend to be pretty aggressive about their upgrades, and so it is a one-off, but you do feel compelled when they. I don't know why they went from they did like a Capture 112 and then they jumped to 20. I don't know what happened to the other 13 through 19 versions. So now I think they're up to Capture 121 or something. But the truth is that it is good value for the money if it's something that you're using. I think they're making a great product out of Capture One. And I just got Luminar AI. I had Luminar 4. Can you buy a Fuji camera? They give you like a free copy of Luminar 4, which is pretty interesting. It's a whole AI photography thing. So I just started playing around with Luminar AI, which I think I paid $60 or $70 for. It's pretty amazing. It's amazing that you can go outside and take a photograph of a landscape, and with one click, it automatically creates a mask, and you have the choice between 30 different skies that you can move around in your photographs, and it's instantaneous. It looks super realistic sometimes, and it looks totally fake other times, but it's amazing what they're doing to technology.
But essentially, this is what our phones have been doing.
Oh, I know.
You know what it's like. That you then you take a shot with your SLR when you're out and about, and then you take a shot with your or your mirrorless or whatever, and then you take a shot with your phone next to it, and that instant rendering that your phone's doing, and then you spend ages in Lightroom, Photoshop, Capture, whatever, trying to get what your phone did. Now, obviously, when you get into detail, the phone things are a bit muddy, but in terms of the way that the AI's worked on the exposure, it's pretty phenomenal. So having that built into post-production software for your raw files is really interesting.
Yeah.
And again, it's this rendering of the raw rendering from Capture One compared to Lightroom. It is night and day different. And Igor's just talking about it as well. What is Adobe doing? Well, quite across the board, what is Adobe doing at the moment? We've just done the first project job that I've done with Jago. We work together a lot. We've always used Premiere if we've been doing joint work and just pinging project files backwards and forwards. And we've been doing that with Resolve this time. It's the first thing we've worked on together in Resolve. And I think he's sold on it now as well. And it's just such a better product. And why am I paying? Just each month that goes by, when I see on my bank statement there's that 50 quid payment to Adobe's gone out again, it just grates more and more on me because it's a piece of shit, that software. Anyway, I wonder.
Like, what I would love is, my wife just got an iPad Air, really for art, with the Apple Pencil 2. If somebody like Capture One could create an iPad iOS version of their software that would support essentially the same workflow that I have with the Fuji cameras for stills, I would probably be extremely tempted to pick up an iPad Air and not have to lug around a laptop computer and just take that little X100V, an iPad, and just make that what I use to do, anything that I'm doing with photography for the most part. It's not that taking a MacBook Pro is a problem, but just throwing that little camera, an iPad in a case. I mean, I haven't had an iPad since the iPad 2, so we're talking, basically at the beginning of time when it came to tablets. But it is very tempting if the support was there, especially if I could use those film simulations, which I'm kind of kind of near and dear to me. The other way you could do it, though, is just shoot with, the Fuji camera and make sure you're shooting RAW and JPEGs, and then you would just make modifications to that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm tempted. Just by the way, before I forget here, because I won't, but I just wanted to bring this up. Archie, thank you so much for the super chat. Jem, what is your take on the Sony URX PO3D? Several years out now. I think it may be the best small crew solo shooter audio solution. I'll give that to you one more time for the A7S III and the FX3. Archie, I am still very, very partial to the UWP and the whole Sony URX system. I've had nothing but reliable experiences with that. And the dual channel receiver with those transmitters, I think, is fantastic. You couple that with the fact that if you get the adapter and you're using it with an A7S III or an FX3 and you can just pass that data to your camera digitally, I would tend to agree with you. I'm still using those Sony systems with most of my cameras that are XLR based, or even for some of my smaller cameras. Usually when I go out with the Fuji cameras, I'm using things like the Wireless Go because it's just so convenient. But you definitely have to, come in and use a little Isotope RX on there. So, yeah, that's actually FilmKit is bringing up. I got the M1 MacBook Air. That's the other one that's really appealing to me. It's almost just get like a tiny MacBook Air and have that along with the camera.
I'm the same. So the laptop that I'm on right now is a nearly 7-year-old MacBook Pro 15-inch, and it's getting long in the tooth. They stopped supporting the drivers for the CUDA stuff ages ago. So it's kind of been a hamstrung machine from the off. So I am ready for an upgrade on my laptop this year, without doubt. And then I was looking at the M1 MacBook Air and the M1 MacBook Pro, and spec-wise, there's not very much in it. And the Air, for the size of the thing, and seeing a lot of videos of people cutting in Resolve on that and doing quite a lot more than I thought would be ever possible on one of those. I'm sorely tempted. I don't edit on that. I've got a big edit machine, but just for on the road, just for either dumping files, doing sort of quick rough edits, first cuts, rough cuts, and for transcoding stuff.
Yep.
It looks perfect. It looks really good. So I'm just trying to work out all the Brexit stuff of buying stuff through my company that's based in the UK and getting it to the Czech Republic at the moment, and dealing with the sales tax stuff, the VAT. But let's not get into that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think I'm looking for that small computer, really not for video, but I'm looking at it for stills. And just I mean, I had a MacBook Air, and my oldest daughter still has it. It's long in the tooth at this point. It was probably up there in my top 2 or 3 favorite computers of all time. Just the size of it. It wasn't big enough to edit video on, even though I did. But it was just traveling.
Was that the 11 or the 13?
13. But I would be tempted.
We still have the 11.
I would be tempted. I would be tempted now. Do they still make an 11 in the MacBook Air, or is it only the 13?
Only the 13, I think.
Yeah, I would be, if they made an 11 now, and I was going to use it for what we're talking about, which is primarily for photography and just being on the road. I would probably seriously consider an 11.
This was my reasoning when I bought that 11. I was sort of looking at iPads, and my laptop was getting a little long in the tooth, and I think I bought that one off eBay. It had been really lightly used. It was only about 3 months old. And it's still, my wife still has that machine. It's still fantastic. I was cutting video with it. I edited, we shot something in Vegas one year, or we went out, we took this muscle car out onto the dry lake bed with my friend Matt. After NAB, he rented this muscle car. He had some sort of privileged kind of deal at one of the loyalty club things with one of the car rental places. So we got this enormous 6-liter Dodge Challenger thing, the RT one. Is that the hot one? I don't know, something like that. We ground the thing out twice, getting it onto this lake bed. It's about 20 miles south of Vegas. We were razzing this thing up and down this dry lake bed. We were shooting stuff with a drone. We shot this funny little film. We got the thing back to the hotel, put it in the parking garage, slept. Matt was getting up super early the next morning to fly back home. And when he got out there, both back tires were completely deflated. There was no air in them whatsoever.
Wait,
and
did somebody knife it?
No. So after we'd done this, we drove. I mean, this car was just white. It was a black car, but it was white because it was just covered in dust and sand stuff from this lake bed. We took it back, washed it, found this car wash, hosed it all down, got all the muck off it, parked it in the parking garage, went to bed. He got up at 6 to get his flight. Missed his flight because the tires were flat. Phoned the rental company. They came, picked it up. There was no tread left on the tires whatsoever. We burned the tires off completely. Don't know how that's happened. Why have you given me a car with no tread on the tires? We're just doing donuts and stuff. And you think it's sand, it's soft, it's not abrasive. It's quite abrasive. So anyway, we shot this film and I edited the whole film waiting for my flight home in the airport in Vegas on that 11-inch laptop.
Yeah.
Which might be on the channel here, actually. I think it's years ago, and it's just like a fun little thing we did messing around. But yeah, so great. That 11-inch, and it was the same size as an iPad. Or it was like this much bigger than an iPad. And it just seemed, well, why would I buy an iPad?
I know. Yeah, I mean, I used to edit all the time on that 13-inch too. It's just, it wasn't practical at a certain point. Another question from Archie that maybe you can answer, which is, and thank you for the super chat, is there a photography editor that can utilize a lift gamma gain wheel controller, IG Tandem Elements, or one of the other third-party ones that are starting to come out? If you're not talking about iOS or Android device, I think there is. There's one that people do use for photography a lot, which has wheels and stuff. What is that called? Anybody here in the chat?
Are you talking about a physical surface?
Yeah. Well, Igor is saying that Capture One can use the tangent controllers, but there are other controllers on the market that people can use.
Yeah, so the Loop Deck is the big one. So Loop Deck do various versions. They do a basic one, which I used, which was mainly for Lightroom when it came out, and I have that and really like it. The Loop Deck Plus, and then they brought out the more recent one, which is a more square format, and it's got buttons. It's much more mappable, so you can completely rewrite the whole thing to various bits of software. And they must have Capture One. I don't know for sure that they do, but I'm fairly sure that it works for a lot of video editing stuff as well, including.
Oh, but Archie is saying that Loop Deck is one wheel. Yeah, I think what happens though, Archie, is
I know what you mean. Yeah,
but so you're not getting multiple wheels, but what you're doing, I believe, is you're using the keys on it, and what you're doing is you're taking that one wheel and you're saying, okay, I'm going to adjust lift, and you adjust lift. You press another one, you do gamma, lift, gamma, gain, and that is. I mean, honestly, you're generally not turning more than one dial at the same time anyway, and it's an inconvenience because it's another keystroke, another click. But that one wheel is basically, is doing multiple functions. So the advantage is that you're toggling, but you've got a smaller controller potentially than if you're going into like the tangent wheels and stuff. So what you have is a more portable solution. And if you're talking, they're not the only ones. It's not just the Loop Deck and Tangent. There's one other one that I've been seeing, which is about this big. It looks like kind of like a large paperback book. And that's the deal. Yeah, Archie can do it like a DJ. He could be turning two wheels at the same time. Blackmagic Micro Panel. That's specific.
That's
though.
Good. I had that for a little while, but it's only Resolve. It doesn't really work with anything else.
Right.
Or it certainly didn't when I had it, but it was a fantastic thing. Blackmagic called and asked if I wanted to borrow one for a little while. I was, well, yeah, sure, no problem. Send it, and I'll play with it. Became completely reliant and hooked on it, and then I was desperately hoping they'd forgotten that they'd lent it to me. And when they phoned to arrange to come and pick it up, I was very disappointed.
Yes.
I know.
Maybe not devastated.
Oh,
Photoshop
I
can work
was.
with
No, I was still
controllers.
devastated.
Yeah. Photoshop can work with controllers, right? I mean, Capture
It
One
can. Yeah.
can, as somebody said, with the tangent. Yeah, I can't remember, Archie, what the name of the other controller is, but I just saw it recently. It's just not something I've ever been able to
one
get
that I
into.
think the Loop Deck CT, I think, is a massively flexible system, which is their little square one with the big wheel in the middle and various programmable buttons, which you can actually change how they appear as well. So rather than that whole system with their older ones, which you could remap everything, but then I always thought, well, that's really difficult to remember what you've remapped things to, and there's a lot of learning involved in that, a lot of time. Whereas this actually, the buttons changed. I think the display. I think I'm right in thinking that. So you can. It's much easier to configure it and learn how to use it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
What's the other system? What's the other system? It's like it's a modular system that you click pieces together and you can.
Yeah.
And that you
I think
can
I
also do
was
some
talking
pretty
about this
interesting.
once, and I can't remember what it's called. It's amazing. Yeah. It's all kind of like MIDI controllers, and then you buy the thing, and then there's a software package that you can buy on top of the hardware, which then maps all that stuff to a particular bit of software. I can't remember what it. Palette
360 is that it? I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway,
let's see. Is anybody else in the chat using controllers with stuff not just for video but for photography stuff? Palette gear looks interesting. I've got to remember the name of this other system. You've got the Tangent Wave. You've got the Loop Deck Live, which has
that's
more than one
that's
knob.
more for streaming stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and then goodness, I can't remember the name of it. It's Palette. Yeah, Orbiter module. Thoughts on the Rode Wireless Go? I think they need to do a firmware update. I've been hearing a couple of small things, but the Wireless Go 2 we spoke about last week, I think that it looks pretty great for the money, for $300 US.
I think it looks amazing. And the other interesting thing, which I don't think we picked up on when we were talking about it last week, which I'd seen in a video from Rode earlier this week, was that you can plug it into a USB port on your laptop and have a DI audio source in that way as well, which is useful.
Here's the other thing that I was thinking of, and it's very inexpensive. I know nothing about it. It's called Tourbox, Photo and Video Editing Console, TOUR, like you're being taken on a tour. It's $149 US. And it says it's compatible with Photoshop, Adobe Lightroom, Premiere, SAI, and more. I don't know what the more is. But
it looks a little
janky. It looks very plasticky. Plasticky.
Looks a little numb. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's other things on the market.
It doesn't look like it's got enough buttons.
No, I mean the Loop Deck for sure. And the Loop Deck starts at about $250 for their base version, but that's a small kind of it's the big one, which is the Creative Tool or something.
The CT is the one that's got a lot of is the most flexible. Certainly if you're using it for video editing, and then there's the Loop Deck and the Loop Deck Plus. The Loop Deck was the original product, and the Loop Deck Plus was the new and improved version of that, and then the CT is the smaller one. And I think you can put multiple units of that together for more control. So that whole thing of being able to use 3 wheels, you could use that in a similar way. But it's still not the same as having 3 proper balls to be using.
No, of course not.
Obviously.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at this tour box and seeing what the deal is. I mean, I think its biggest advantage so far that I'm seeing is just the cost. People are using it for editing and stuff.
It looks horrible. It looks awful.
It's really fancy.
It looks like it's some kind of toy for your 3-year-old to It's like it's a Duplo. That's what it's a Lego Duplo control panel. That's what that thing is.
It's like a light bright.
What's a light bright?
Archie, after you do these, you don't have to super chat with questions. We really appreciate it, and it's really, really nice. But I really appreciate it. But we're happy to answer them anyway. I was also wondering about guitar foot pedal channel switching for the A10 Mini, so I can have hands-free live streaming conferencing. Man, that's outside of my realm. I don't know if that's even possible.
Could you use a wah-wah pedal, and like you could dissolve between shots with it? We use the wire it comes in, and that'd be great.
What is Jared saying? He's too Tommy Calloway. Crap, I'm late. Oh, wait, are you saying, Jared, you came in later than Tommy? I don't know what that means. Cameron says wireless go-to got an update this morning. Okay. Fixed it up. You can also connect it to your phone via USB-C or adapter. If you record uncompressed audio, you can export WAV files. Yeah, I think there was a problem originally with the release version where it was capping out and it wouldn't export after a certain amount of recorded amount of data or something like that.
Yeah, I read that.
Archie's excited about using a wah-wah pedal for dissolves.
It's a great idea.
Wait, Colin says foot pedals with live streaming is a thing. Wow, there's a whole world out there. I mean, MIDI, I guess there's something. You can do so much stuff with MIDI. It's kind of crazy. Who's bothering me? It's so weird. Oh, somebody's sending me as a... Who said this to me? Somebody... that's funny. I know who this is. That's pretty funny. Yeah, that counts, Tommy.
Hey.
Tommy just texted me a picture of a $5 bill saying that this counts as a super chat, right? It's literally a picture of a $5 bill in his hand, which is ridiculous. I know, Tommy, I got it. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, I think that one, just to sort of, go back to what we were talking about earlier with photography, I wouldn't recommend that people become photographers. But if you're in the video space, one of the things that I think can help you immensely with just capturing images is to bring a camera with you. Now, fortunately, we all have these, and that lets you do it, but they're not selective focus. They don't really give you the same kind of control, except for post photograph when it comes to things like portrait mode and dialing in your aperture. It's just not the same experience. But having either a fixed focal length or even an interchangeable lens camera with at least an APS-C size sensor, if you're somebody who's shooting video all of the time, it's amazing how much you can, learn by not having the stress of going out and having to shoot a job. And it's a lot easier sometimes it's a lot harder and a lot easier to take still photographs, meaning I find that it's easier for me to shoot video and feel like I'm satisfied with the result because it's a moving image and things. But it's a lot harder to take a composed image with a still camera that I'm happy with. So it takes a lot more work for me to get to something that I really...
I'm the other way around. I'm totally the other way around. So with a still, because I guess that's where I started, that I always find that video-wise, I'm always wanting to try and get the same sort of aesthetic. But because it's moving, everything's moving all the time. Obviously, that's the point of it. That you can never have that same level of control to have... You can get everything quite perfect in a still frame.
Yes.
I find that a much more straightforward thing to do. And then I'm always frustrated with video that it's so rare that I can have that same level of kind of control over it, I guess.
Well, yeah, I guess maybe I'm saying it the
Not
wrong
control,
way.
That's the wrong word. But.
Yeah, I'm saying it's much harder for me to find still photographs that I'm really happy with. But what I do find is that because when I go out and I shoot stills, it makes me look at the world a lot differently than when I'm shooting a video project. Because when I'm shooting a project on video, it's sort of like, okay, we have to go shoot this. We're going to go set it up. We're going to shoot, blah. It's maybe one camera. It's two cameras. We're going to set it up. We're going to do it. And it's sort of dictated by the project. But when I go take stills, I'm not a professional photographer in the sense that I'm being hired to do that as paid work. I have been occasionally, but it's not really what I do for a living when it comes to how I'm making my money. So when I go out with a camera and I'm taking stills, I find that experience is very different, and it allows me to get better at understanding certain things that I don't usually spend the time to do when I'm shooting video, which is, again, fixed focal length and shooting with a 23mm lens all day or a 16mm lens all day. I tend not to shoot wide when I shoot video, but sometimes when I shoot photography stuff, I force myself to put a much wider focal length on the camera, and it changes my viewpoint in terms of where that camera height is, what my perspective is, where I'm going to compose things. I find that it makes me better in the long term at shooting video projects. And I also just really enjoy it. It's like cooking for me when I take photographs. I just don't feel like I have any pressure except for just finding things. And I'm not doing it for anybody else, generally, I guess, is the thing for me. I don't know if that makes any sense. But
no, it does make sense completely. And because these days, far more of my commercial work is video than stills, and it used to be completely the other way around, that it really has rekindled a love of photography for the sake of doing it. You go out for a walk, and I like doing this because particularly right now we're in lockdown, and you can go out into the forest, go for a walk, and you can spend the time and do it, and I love it again. And when you're doing it it doesn't matter how much you enjoy doing it. I think if it's a job, it always becomes a job, and it's still better than being an accountant, obviously, but it becomes,
yeah.
It's work.
Yeah,
you think about it in a different way. Whereas when you're doing so, I completely get what you're saying. When there's no pressure and you're just doing it for the love of it. It's great.
Yeah, and I started in photography as well. I mean, I was 8 or 9 years old when my dad put a camera in my hand, and he had a darkroom in our kitchen, and that's sort of how I started. But I didn't, and then I just stopped. By the time I was 14 or 15 years old, I didn't really take photographs again until I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. So there was a big period of time where I shifted into video production, and unlike you, where you really started your career in photography, so you were actually making a living doing it. But I just find that I become better overall at what I'm doing when I go out and take photographs. I just find that I'm looking at things differently, and that translates later on into the way I walk into a space or a location, and I look at things, and I might put the camera in a completely different place or shoot at a different focal length than I even would have thought at. Because, you sit there for 5 or 7 years with a 24-105 on your camera, which so many of us have done when it came to especially DSLRs. And it's not that you don't have a range of focal lengths, but you're never really thinking about shooting wider than 24. You're never shooting longer than 105. You're just not thinking the same way that I think you start to think. One of the reasons that I've loved going to the Fuji system is I very rarely use zoom lenses on those cameras, and I'm almost always using prime lenses. And I just find that I'm much better at understanding what a focal length is that I choose now than I used to be. Because, when you grab the barrel of the lens on the 24-105, you turn it. You don't usually look at the number and the focal length that you're shooting at. And you just sort of say, okay, that's the shot, and I'm going to go ahead and shoot at that. Or at least I used to. And now I am much more specific about focal lengths. And I feel much more educated that I've been shooting so much more in the last couple of years with primes that when somebody even has a zoom lens in production, they'll be on an 18 to 55, and I'll say, that's, where are you right now? 23. And I'll say, okay, let's go to like around the 35. And I usually wind up pretty close to what I'm looking for, because I
Right.
understand that based on that sensor size and that focal length, that's probably what my view is going to be. I don't
And I
know.
think you end up with certain. No, I agree. I think it's we did this job, which I think we can finally share by the end of this week, that we shot when I was over in the UK back in January, which was this thing with the new Land Rover,
Yeah.
and we did a day of stills on it, and then we did 3 or 4 days of shooting this promo video on it. But the stills day, we shot everything at either 35 or 200, everything. And it was just those two lenses. Well, in fact, we both had an R, and one camera had the 35, the Sigma 35 on it, and the other had a 70-200, but we were only using it at 200. And it's great, and you just get into that completely sort of not fixed mindset, but you really know what you're doing with things, and that whole set of images has a certain feel to it, because we haven't gone absolutely all over the place. And I think when you get that experience with it, and you're doing it all the time, and that you have that kind of you have the confidence in yourself that's going to look good for this. We don't need to try it at 16. We don't need to do mega wides. We don't, because it's not going to suit the shot or suit the product, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I agree that it really trains you into knowing what works for certain subject types. If it's automotive stuff, if it's people, it's landscape stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And I should also recommend to people that, don't feel like you need to shoot everything at a wide aperture. You really have to think about the content that you're creating and what you're doing. And that is definitely almost sort of like a fallback for a lot of the content that I see. It's not that I don't want a background to go soft if I'm trying to focus on a product or something that's there. But I think that another great exercise is to start shooting things. I'm actually going to start to do this even more. I'm going to start to shoot things I'm going to stop down the camera, and if you shoot at let's say an 8 to an 11, you're kind of forced to really think about composition in a different way than when you're shooting wide open. Because you really have to, it's a huge thing, because if you're shooting everything at as Jago's saying, 1.4 or nothing, if you're shooting everything at 1.4, you can put that background out of focus and it's going to look all lovely and soft and everything else, but you're sometimes using that as a crux to not really thinking about your composition. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we it's funny with Jago saying this. He's doing this because we. on this shoot, we were doing the first section of stills we were doing. I was shooting the stills and he was driving, and then we kind of swapped over for bit to the day. And he's going, "What are you shooting at?" I'm going, like, 2.8. He's going, what? Not 1.4? No. Well, a tiny little bit of depth of field. We want to see the back of the Land Rover, not just the front, because it was really about the lighting on the thing. It would be kind of, but it's an interesting. And I think when I started, and I was using medium format, and I was doing a lot of interior stuff, and you needed to have depth of field with it. And I had this more or less fixed. I think maybe the first year that I was working, and this is probably 17, 18 years ago, I think I shot everything at f11, more or less everything. And it was all just about how you were composing things and lighting things, and that was that. So I've kind of come from that background, and particularly doing interiors. My commercial work was all interiors at the beginning, so you were needing to make sure you had full depth of field. And then so I've sort of come the other way, and then been sort of more back to using depth of field more as a creative tool later in career. I think that's probably the last 10 years, obviously. And then now that sort of trend of shooting everything absolutely wide open all the time.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know, it kind of wears a little bit thin.
Yeah, I mean, Archie, I would say that I wouldn't necessarily say that architecture is better at an F11. You have to...
No, not at all.
There's two things that you really have to think about when you're thinking about deep, depth of field. And the first one, of course, is your aperture. But the second one, of course, is your focal length. And, if you're shooting at a 300 millimeter focal length at an F11, so shit's still going to be soft in the background depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's a combination. Yeah.
And where your subject is in relation to your background, and you can have your subject here and your background 20 meters away, you can still be getting a fairly shallow depth of field at those sort of photos. It just depends on. It's that not that instant thing of it being everything wide open. The other thing that you've got to remember is that I think gets missed a bit is that lenses aren't that the sharpest wide open.
No,
I know a lot of us in here are going to know this.
And they're also not this. You have diffraction when you stop them down. I mean, generally when you get to like an F16 and stuff, you can have other problems. They get all funky.
Yeah, I mean, lenses sweet spots are in the middle of their aperture range generally.
Yeah. I mean, you're usually pretty. If you were shooting on an f1.4 lens, you'd be pretty confident to say from a 2.8 to an 11, you're in a great range there. But overall, your 4 to 8 is like that's a pretty big sweet spot right there for a lot of people who are shooting, and you combine that with focal length. But I would say that one of the things that you brought up, Ben, which I think is important, is we did an architectural project last year where we shot at a school, and it totally changed the way I was thinking about shooting. And I think that it's a great exercise. If you have no interest in shooting architectural interiors, just force yourself to shoot them anyway, because it will force you to think about composition and depth of field in a totally different way. More than anything else. You take a great photograph of your living room or your kitchen and figure out how to take great photographs of your living room and your kitchen and your bedroom, and it will be it'll be eye-opening for you, I think.
It's not only in terms of composition, but in terms of attention to detail.
Give me a second.
I can hear myself.
Well, that's because my headphones went funky. Go ahead, I'm back.
Okay, and you go. So but also in terms, particularly when you're using wider lenses, it's that thing of space gets stretched. So if you're using mega wide lenses for interiors, which is obviously always very tempting to do and not always a great idea, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But it stretches space between things. So it really helps you as well in terms of placing your furniture within your set, or placing props within your set, because you have this such an idea about how an image is composed and how space needs to sit and balance. And when you start seeing the space, you go like the space between that sofa and that coffee table. I know when I stick a 16mm lens on it, I'm going to have to bring that sofa back because this space behind the sofa is going to get all knocked out of shape. So I think it's a brilliant exercise in learning all of that stuff. So not just about your composition, but in terms of where you're placing the camera and what's in there, but also dressing your sets.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to Archie saying depth of field for interviews with the subject interviewing and their job site is in the background. I mean, for sure, when you're shooting interviews, you're generally going to lean on a shallower depth of field because you're trying to create separation between your subject matter and what's behind you. At the same time, the more you do what we're talking about, which is shooting stop down, shooting at let's just do a lot of shooting between an f8 and an f11, it will really force you to think about what is in your frame and what is distracting in your frame. And sometimes force you, when you're in an interview setup situation, to say, I'm not just going to shoot at a 2 or a 2.8, I'm going to actually change the background. It's either compositionally by changing your frame or by taking posters or things that are distracting out of the background. It doesn't mean that you should be shooting interviews at an f8, but if you needed to shoot an interview at an f8, could you in fact make that work? I'm not saying people go out and do all of this stuff, but they're all things that when you get to a job, when you're shooting something, it just makes you think about how you're going to approach it. It allows you to problem solve even better. What used to be something that would be, I can never shoot here because it's just impossible because of all the stuff that's there. Could be I'll spend 15 minutes and now I can have something that looks great, and I think that
Right.
that's also something that's extremely beneficial. So,
So 360's got an interesting point. Depends if you want to sell that space place, you shoot wide. So there's yes, there's a
yeah.
definitely element to it, but there's also a thing particularly if you're doing hotels, which was kind of where I cut my teeth doing, I suppose. That if you go mega wide with your focal lengths, which obviously means you're getting loads in, and as long as the hotel rooms are nice and dressed and you're not needing to hide crap, which obviously happens a reasonable amount. But if you've got that space, what you've got to be careful of, and particularly with real estate stuff as well, you've got to be really careful with this, because once you get even at a 16 mil on a full frame, you're already starting to make things look bigger than they are, and it's really messing with the perception of space. So you go wider than that, and now we're starting to see really decent lenses by Lauer, particularly, who are making very low distortion lenses at down sort of 11 mil on full frame. Now, great, you get everything in. If you've got lots of architectural features ceiling wise, you've got mezzanine floors and all that kind of stuff, and beams, great. But then you get a prospective buyer in, or someone's booked the room based on your photographs, and they come in and then they kick off and start leaving shitty reviews on TripAdvisor because it's not what was advertised. So I agree completely that the wide stuff for architectural stuff makes things look good, but it makes things look a little bit false.
Yeah, and your eye will get trained to that if you start shooting that way. So it becomes very obvious when you go to Zillow or some architectural website, or you see a photograph of a house that you're about to rent. It's very obvious when they're shooting in the space and they're using a wide focal length. To me now, I can definitely tell. And all you have to do as either a photographer or a cinematographer or DP is just go shoot a crap ton of places at a 12 to 18 millimeter focal length, and you'll know what it looks like. And then when you see it in the future, you'll know. Answer to Archie's question: depth of field for interviews with the subject interviewing and their job site is in the background. The answer to depth of field when you're shooting is, if the question is, well, the follow-up is blur out their job site or have the job site in focus, it depends on what you're doing. If you are shooting a video or taking a photograph of somebody who is the foreman of a construction site, you absolutely 100% want to see the job site in focus. But that is going to make you work harder as a photographer or DP to make sure that whatever your composition isn't a freaking mess in the background. You have to really think about it, because when everything's in focus, there's a reason that Citizen Kane is considered one of the greatest films of all time from a cinematography standpoint. Everything is in focus in that movie, but everything is composed arguably perfectly, because of who that cinematographer was and how they shot that film. And it's pretty remarkable if you think about it, because you can pick almost any frame from that film and every single element in that film is in focus, including an interior shot with a kid playing outside. And, it's all about thinking about composition and blocking and leading lines and all of the things that are happening there. And it's just a never-ending education for all of us to get better at those things. And you can do that very easily, not necessarily very well, but very easily by going out and shooting with a stills camera, and just taking a camera out and shooting photographs. And I'm not recommending that everybody uses a fixed focal length when they go and shoot with a stills camera. Having an interchangeable lens camera or a fast zoom lens that's at least a 2.8 can be a great learning tool as well. But just use it as a variable prime. Don't use it as something that you're just being sloppy about. Say, okay, I'm going to shoot a whole bunch of photographs at 24 millimeters, and then go ahead and shoot a bunch at 35 and a bunch at 50 and so on and so forth, and see how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. And Jago, absolutely. The amount of times I've had that happen, where you're on a construction site, or I do a lot of work offshore on oil rigs, and everything's obviously extremely health and safety oriented in those environments. And yeah, guaranteed you start shooting that stuff, and there's someone without the correct PPE on. They've not got the hard hat on, or they've got it on backwards, which isn't how it's been certified. So, I wanted a job that the client was actually on, so they were controlling what PPE was being used. We spent 2 days shooting this stuff, and they couldn't use a single shot because every single person in it was wearing the wrong PPE. So 2 days, 2-person crew they paid for, and they couldn't use any of it.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah.
With that, I think we've made up the time for all the mess at the beginning. I have no idea if this episode will be available for replay because it crapped out twice, but we're hoping. We're hoping.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
But anyway, this was kind of a dry run for episode 100 next week anyway. So
Yeah.
If this one disappears, it's not the end of the world.
Prakash is asking about how was that shot made with the interior and the kid playing outside Sharp and Citizen Kane. I don't know. I'm sure there's a breakdown of it. I mean, they definitely shot probably a wide lens, and and they were stopped down. And Prakash knows how to take photographs. I mean, Prakash is here on the live stream. Prakash is probably one of the best architectural photographers I have ever known. I mean, I know him personally. But his work is just outstanding. So his work is great. So he knows what he's talking about. And we're going to have to find out how that works in that scene. Good. Ben, you should have shot it at a 1.4, Jago said. Who gives a shit about PPE when you shoot it at a 1.4, you know? Just need the person in the foreground, the middle ground, to be in focus and make sure they have the right PPE, and then it doesn't matter.
It's a good point. We'll be having this argument forevermore.
With that, everybody, I'm late to the party, but if you haven't seen Shetland, check it out. It's a good show. I'm enjoying it very much. I don't know why I'm saying that, but, you know.
Oh, Shetland's great. Is that
really
is that in the States at the moment?
Well, it's been around for a while, but I'm just getting around to catching up with it. So we watched season 1 last night.
Yeah, I like
we're
that.
in now. It's good stuff. All right, kiddos. Next week, it might be 99C. It might be 100. It might be 99C even with Caleb, just because C is for Caleb. And also, we might not have enough together for next week. I'm also going to be working every day. And the week after, I'm working, but the set is dark, so I'm going to have a little bit more time to prep. So I have a feeling it's 2 weeks from now that we're going to have the official episode 100. Oh, what? Are you taking a piss? What are you? Why are you giving me shit about that? Why? You're like, because I want to drag it out and I want to torture you. That's why.
I know. Because we've agreed that there's an amnesty at 100, and that we just start counting again from there. So I can no longer give you shit about your counting.
Thank you, Jago.
Cheers, Jago.
Yeah. So the new drone's coming tomorrow. You'll have to give us an update on that. And everybody get some sleep. And the 100th episode that never came, or it did come, it's just we're not acknowledging that it already happened months ago. But that's part of the fun here, Cameron Flask. I tell you one thing, I'm not going to be drinking wine or beer at episode 100. It's definitely going to be a 17 or 18-year-old scotch. And don't pull some BS, Ben. You got to come up with a good drink for that one, okay? If Caleb's going to go home and shoot from home so he can have the liquor, then you've got to have something good.
All right. I will find something special.
Or 360 Grad said, yeah, maybe just go to 101. We'll jump from like 99C to 101 and just skip it. And we could do whatever we want. Pleasure, everybody. Right. Thanks again for coming. It's always a nice break every week. And Ben, get some sleep. And we'll see you next time. Take care.